Hello and welcome to Conversations with Dr. Stephen Greer. This is Dr. Greer and I'm the director of the Disclosure Project and the Center for the Study of Extraterrestrial Intelligence, CSETI.org. If you want to find us on the web, CSETI.org and disclosureproject.org. And I'd like to thank the folks at the World Puja Network for hosting us every couple of weeks. We have an opportunity during this time to update you with some of the experiences we've been having making contact with intelligent life forms from other star systems and the work we're doing for disclosure and also new energy. And I'm excited about today because this is really a show where we're basically going to play for you the evidence of contact that is really quite newsworthy. I have to say, if this was from the SETI project, the Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence, that has these large radio telescopes aimed at the stars, it would be front page news all over the world. And interestingly, we're making contact with instrumentation, and we have proof of this sort of contact and communication happening. And it's interesting how because it's not being done with the whistles and all the falderah of a giant radio telescope, the media so far hasn't picked up on this, but eventually I have no doubt they will. Basically, those of you who've been following our work will know that for the last couple of years we've had an amazing man who's joined our team, Emery Smith, who will be with us on the phone today on the show. And he will be playing some of these tones that we've had contact with, and I'm going to introduce that in a moment. And Emery has been doing amazing work with not only photography, but also helping to get the equipment and get instrumentation so that when we're having contact, we have not only photographic evidence, but also electronic and auditory evidence of the contact. And so I want to thank Emery for all that great work he's been doing for the last 2 years since he's gotten involved with CSETI. What we're going to do today is to really review first how it is that we make contact. And those of you who are new to the program, if you go to CSETI.org, you'll see that we hold expeditions around the world 4 or 5 times a year. And we recently have just returned from an expedition in the United Kingdom where we went into the crop circles, and also we were in Colorado in June where we had amazing contact that occurred, and we're actually getting ready now to go to Mount Shasta in the next week or so. And I think that one of the things that people first ask is, how is this contact happening? And I just want to review briefly how it is that we do this. And there are really 3 main ways that we do it. And since we're on the World Puja Network, I'm going to emphasize first the trans-dimensional conscious manner. And in the science of consciousness, those of you who've studied awareness and the science of consciousness know that the mind is actually an omnipresent field of pure consciousness that enables each living person who's sentient to be awake and aware. And what we have discovered is that intelligent civilizations have technologies, and I have called it consciousness-assisted technologies, and also technologies that assist consciousness, where their communication systems are going at multiples of the speed of light and interface with a coherent thought and consciousness when it's established in an expanded state. Some would call it the samadhi state. But even in the relaxed state of mind, where the mind is more open and where you can begin to remote view, as they say, distant places in space, what we find is that these interstellar civilizations have the ability to pick up thought and to pick up consciousness when an individual or a group of individuals enter into that place of the placeless, the level of consciousness is beyond the limits and the boundaries of linear space and time. And this makes sense because if you think about it, how are you going to travel at the speed of light or anything less than the speed of light between galaxies and star systems? If you take the Andromeda galaxy, it's 2.5 million light years from here, and our group has had contact with extraterrestrial beings from the Andromeda galaxy. As outrageous as that sounds to make that statement, but we have. And I think that when you think about the fact that even if you were traveling at the speed of light, which is 186,000 miles every second that you're traveling at that kind of speed, it would take you 2.5 million years to get from that galaxy to here. If you're talking about even a nearby star system that's maybe 1% of the way through the Milky Way galaxy, the Milky Way galaxy, our home galaxy, is 100,000 light years across. Well, 1% of that distance is 1,000 light years. So at the speed of light, it would take 1,000 years to get from that star system to Earth, and another 1,000 years to get back. And the same thing with radio signals. If you look at microwave, cell phone, television, radio, those are all traveling at the speed of light. So using those kind of instruments, it would take literally 2,000 years to have a two-way conversation between a star system 1,000 light years away and Earth. And that's the paradigm of quote-unquote modern science. Now, when I say modern science, I say the part of modern science that has suppressed all this information that's talked about the World Puja Network. And I think that what we're finding is that the interstellar civilizations that are here, and which disclosureproject.org has proven are here, are using technologies that are way beyond the speed of light. And when you go through the crossing point of light, you enter into a transdimensional or hyperdimensional universe where the speed of light is no longer relevant. It's more, the question is, what's the speed of thought? What's the speed of consciousness? What's the capabilities of the so-called worlds of light and astral energy? All these subtle realms that are folded within space-time and actually transcend linear space-time. And so when you think about it, this ability to remote view, to go on the path of the seer, to awaken your inner sight and see remote places in space, this is, while very ancient on the one hand, very germane to the space age and the contact that we're having. And I think that the shamans and the enlightened people of past civilizations on Earth have all known this, whether it be ancient Egyptian or Himalayan or the Shambhala kingdom or the ancient peoples of South America and the native peoples of America. All of these civilizations, there's evidence, had contact with people from the stars, and they understood the central aspect of consciousness and thought in those protocols. Now, they may not have understood it quite as we do today, but the science is out there now that proves that the state of quiet consciousness, where you can then expand awareness into this universality of awareness, it is the beginning point of making contact. And so we have a program, we call it Ambassadors to the Universe, where we train people in these meditation techniques and in the ability to remote view and to travel amongst the stars faster than the speed of light in awareness and in thought, but then to use the thought to connect to these extraterrestrial peoples and their communication systems and their spacecraft and vector them or show them exactly where we're located. So, for example, we might be in the desert of Colorado, and we will form a circle out in the wilderness, and we will then go into a deep meditative state and then begin to expand awareness to where we then rise upward above the desert into space, and a number of people will then begin to see in their inner sight an extraterrestrial person or spacecraft or planet. And the instruction at that point is then to introduce yourself and welcome them to Earth in universal peace and to show them where we're located. And we then turn the remote viewing around to an active vectoring where we actually guide them into our location through thought. And we will then show them, for example, our planet Earth, which is the third planet from our sun, and then North America, if that's where we are, and then the Colorado region, and then the desert where we're located, all the way down to a few square meters right into the center of our circle. And this is done with a whole group of people doing this. It's a very, very powerful technique. And without exception, we have contact in some form or another, whether it's a craft that materializes, something that an orb that floats through the circle, electromagnetic signals that come in that are then, even though we're in remote areas, begin to go through electromagnetic detectors we have. And so this is quite extraordinary. Now, the conscious component of this is the key thing. We also use two other techniques, and one is we have a high-powered laser that goes up about 200 miles into space in clear air, and then we also have electromagnetic tones that we have had from contact, and also were recorded in the crop circles, that we then play over just regular radio frequencies that we send out into space to give a very precise location in case people's minds aren't as clear as a laser might be. So we use the light, the sound, and thought to make contact and invite these civilizations to Earth. The purpose of all this is not just to see a UFO or something, but is actually to usher in an era when humans become interstellar people, and that we open up this period in time where the Earth becomes a truly part of an interplanetary society, living in peace with these other civilizations. So this is the central purpose of CSETI, and this is what we do when we take groups out to these remote locations around the world. Now, one of the things that I just want to explain, some of the equipment we have on site, we have a whole lot of different equipment. Some of it is rather what you would expect. We have good night scope binoculars, and we have excellent cameras with night scope vision attached to the lenses. We have the lasers I mentioned and the audio equipment. We also have audio recording devices, because frequently a craft or civilization will appear in its tonality. And those of you who know Pujas and the Vedas know that name precedes form. Frequently there'll be a signal that'll come out of space to the group, and we will record that. We have on a number of occasions. Now, we also have electromagnetic devices. These are things like radar detectors, like you'd have in your car to pick up a police car signal when they're trying to catch you speeding. But we also have devices such as a magnetometer, and this is a magnetic field meter that actually picks up the fluxing or the movement in the magnetic field of the Earth. And it's set, when we first get onto a site, it's set at 0. So basically, there's a certain magnetic field on Earth or any place on Earth, and you set the meter to 0 so it's silent. When an extraterrestrial vehicle or communication begins to happen, and it's happening from within space-time, it's not happening in a linear way. We'll get into this in a moment. Those detectors will begin to go off and actually begin to communicate in ways that they are not built to do. It's really an amazing thing to witness. And this has been happening in an increasing fashion since 2007 and 2008, the last 3 or 4 years. And what we're finding is that the extraterrestrial civilizations doing this will be doing the communication through these electronics, while at the same time they're appearing as ships of light or as craft that fully materialize around us. And this goes on throughout the evening. So we have begun to record these detection systems. And you have to remember, we're out in very remote areas. These are not being set off by a police car or by any man-made items, because we're in very remote areas. And it's amazing to see, because it's become not just an indication where they're saying we're here, but they're also communicating specific energy as a contact that you can actually feel. It's almost like, from a energetic point of view, a transcendental level of communication that's deep within consciousness, even has an emotional and spiritual quality to it, even though it may be the sound of it's coming through a rather ordinary piece of man-made equipment like a magnetic field meter. Another piece of equipment we have is something that's called a storm tracker, and this is something that Emery acquired last year, I believe it was, and it picks up the electrostatic discharge of a lightning strike. Is what it's built for. It's for campers and outdoors people to warn them of the approach of an electrical storm. What we found, however, is that the extraterrestrial civilizations that are involved with our group have chosen to use that in a very specific way, which we'll get into in a moment, where it will go off in a sequence and in ways that are very anomalous, even though there are absolutely no electrical storms within hundreds of miles of us. And what we're finding is that they are going within the circuitry, within, I call it infraspace, but within space-time, to communicate through these devices. In other words, if a police radar gun hits one of these radar detectors, they just make a very loud burst of noise until you get past the policeman. Those of you who've ever used this is not what's happening. These are actually coming within the circuitry, and we will have an identical, say 3 or 4 identical laser and radar detectors, and they will only select one, for example, that might be beside me or beside Emery, and they'll begin to communicate in a very anomalous way. The others will not go off at all, even though if it was something man-made that was a linear beam of electromagnetic energy, it would go off. They should all go off on the same frequency at the same time. This isn't happening. They're selectively communicating, and it's sort of what I'm calling this is transdimensional electronic communication, where it's coming through multiple dimensions beyond the speed of light, and then stepping down into linear space-time and communicating within these particular devices. And this is often happening while at the same time we're having extraordinary things that we're seeing or hearing with our ears around us, or even beings that appear in the field near us. So all this is taking place sort of simultaneously, and the reason it is because these civilizations that are visiting the Earth are very eager to make contact with awake humans who are doing this for the purpose of peace, who don't have prejudice against them, and who are doing this for the ability to create a whole new chapter in human history where the sciences of consciousness and the science of new energy and free energy and the ability to live on this planet peacefully become established. And that's really what we're doing. And we feel that the reason we're having this escalating level of contact is because the time for all the secrecy that's going on is ending, and the time for the disclosure of this being known fully by everyone on Earth is very much nearer. And I think that the ETs are interested in finding humans who understand the science of consciousness, as well as these sort of space-age hyperdimensional or transdimensional electronics, so that they can communicate with us. And that's what we're having happen. So I just wanted to give a few minutes of this sort of introduction, and we want to get right into it, because what's happened, and Emery, you can share kind of your experience, what happened in Crestone with this detector, and it was happening on the level of consciousness, but also on the level of the meters themselves. And I want people to hear, a detailed description of kind of what you and I experienced.
Well, it started, there's always usually starting, it always precedes or after you'll see, someone will see something, or the craft will be coming, and right when that happens, these magnetometers and storm trackers and radar detectors, before it happens, will start alarming us, and they'll start going off in very specific tones that are not native to the device at all.
Right.
And like Steve said, they are coming from within space, so it's not something that's coming from a directional. And as it escalates, we usually have an event happen. Now, what happened with Steve and I at one point is the magnetometer, this started back in France, actually,
right.
The first time this happened. And that was when we had an amazing craft that was actually filmed over the field in France. And we walked out to that field, and between Steve and I only, the magnetometer was having a motion that was like a beating heart. And it would constantly beep and beep and beep. And it was only between Steve and I at around our solar plexus and our root chakra in this area, when we held the magnetometer between us at our waistline, that this would become very active. And now at that time, we are also feeling something. Both of us are having an experience. And the same thing happened in Crestone this past year.
Right, right.
And there seems to be a triad between Steve, myself, and these ETs, that when we get together, and I mean very close, within a 3-foot proximity, that this magnetometer starts escalating, and there's a type of download that's coming.
Right.
And this is all happening on many different levels, on a conscious aspect, on a spiritual aspect, and a physical aspect as well. It's a type of communication that's happening. And what I'm experiencing through this is I can actually feel in my light body that there is a connection to oneness. And it may sound strange. I never really talked to you, Steve, about this, but I feel like we're joining together, the three of us, as one.
Right.
And I can feel this bond, and I can see and feel the download that comes from within. Being a human and a crystalline structure, and these devices have crystalline diodes in them, and I think it has a lot to do with it also, with these tones that are coming through interdimensional time, that Steve and I, when we're in this triangular formation, holding this magnetometer, are a kind of antenna.
Correct.
And this antenna is absorbing messages and communication downloads that is actually affecting us on a microcosm level of our DNA. And this change is permeating from a microcosm to a macrocosm, and it's constantly expanding in a waveform so that it will affect not only ourselves, but the people who are right around us. It affects those people and the planet, Gaia, and it actually expands out through the entire humanity of Earth. And it's a beautiful change that's happening, and it's starting, I'm sure, in many places, but it's absolutely starting with the CSETI group and Steve and I, it's like the doorway, which is opening, and the changes are coming. And like I said to you earlier, Steve, I mean, ever since Crestone, that download that we had out there where the magnetometer was over 3 milligauss for quite some time, at least 45 minutes.
Right. This was in Crestone, Colorado in June, by the way. Yeah.
Right. In June, when these little beings were approaching the circle, and we had them there at one part of the circle, and in the center of the circle, at one point, you came up to me, and the magnetometer, as I was filming all this, the magnetometer went absolutely off the scale, and that's when I had this amazing enlightenment experience,
right,
where my body was vibrating.
That's right.
Inside. It was vibrating inside, and I felt this warmth come in, kind of like the warmth like you stand too close to a TV set or a microwave, where you feel some inner heat coming. But it wasn't like the microwave or TV where it felt like it was negative at all. It was a very positive experience. But it was a download. It was absolutely energy coming into our bodies, the both of us, and changing us inside. And ever since Crestone, specifically Crestone, my dreams have been so pure and high def and lucid. I say high def because it's so specifically clear that, I have dreams all the time, but when I was much younger, around the age of 10, I used to be able to control my dreams and do whatever I want in my dreams. So I lost that ability as I got older and into high school. And then recently I regained that ability.
Right.
So
right.
Any intention before I lay down to go to sleep, I can dream about that, whatever that intention is.
Right.
And I will wake up.
Yeah, lucid dreaming, yeah. And it's amazing how that opens with this sort of contact.
Mm-hmm. So you can, have this dream, and you can control what's going on in the dream and find out many different things. And you're aware that you're dreaming.
Right.
And I'm just going to say that the access that you have in that state of consciousness is unlimited.
That's right.
I will leave it at that. It's unlimited. And it's, you can call it the morphogenic field. You can call it whatever you like. It's unlimited access to beyond the universe and all the dimensions that there is, if you choose to use that.
Correct, because that's the nature of the mind within. There's a wonderful saying from the Sufi tradition that says, thinkest thyself a puny form when within thee the universe is folded. And that literally within each individual, by virtue of the nature of consciousness, the entirety of the universe, all the dimensions, all the worlds of light, the vastness of space-time, and the infinity of pure mind is folded within each person. So we're each individual a quantum hologram. And this is one of the things that we found is that what we're doing, since we're on the World Puja Network, I'll talk about this in the many interviews I won't, but we're doing pujas. We're doing ancient Sanskrit Vedic pujas in the circle and with the entire group. And this is increasing the level of resonant contact. When Emery just mentioned in France, I just wanted to make a comment. This ship that was hovering over the field that he photographed, and many of us saw it blip in very quickly, just like at the speed of light. It came after I set up the Puja table in this field on this 2,000-acre estate.
Yeah, that's right.
In France, and that's when they came. And I turned to everyone. I said, "Well, they're coming for the Puja," because what people don't realize is that the ancient knowledge of the science of consciousness, the Vedas, the Sanskrit, the ancient knowledge of spirit, and the different siddhis, S-I-D-D-H-I-S, abilities. These are all things that have been taught and been kept alive by an unbroken lineage of teachers and enlightened beings that have been involved with the earth. But those beings are also very involved with these extraterrestrial civilizations, some of which are literally the guardians physically of this planet and of the earth and the nurturing of humanity. Those are the ones we're having this contact with on an increasing level. And over the last 2 or 3 years, it's been an exponential increase, and it's not just a bunch of noise from an electromagnetic device. It is actually, as Emery said, you can actually, while it's happening, I can see in my mind's eye the actual beings, and I can receive the information. It's sort of the meaning of what they're saying, although it's very abstract. To move it from that abstract level of trans-dimensional consciousness and very, in a sense, space-age communication into English language is something that you have to really get out of your own way and become sort of a really clear channel for it. But in this book that came out about 1.5 years ago, Contact, Countdown to Transformation, there's the last chapter is called the Orion Transmissions. And in 2007 and 2008, we had at Joshua Tree National Park, where I actually became this antenna, like Emery's talking about, and this burst of energy came through for 23 minutes, and then the next year for over an hour or two. Now it's happening, in increasing frequency, and it has to do with almost a triangular energy field between me and Emery and these ETs, and I hate to say this, but it's almost as if they're using our bioelectric field and consciousness and the integration of our bioelectromagnetic field and consciousness through the chakra system to facilitate this sort of contact that then is causing these electromagnetic detectors to be very specifically kind of in resonant tuning with that during this communication. It's an extraordinary experience. And it's really becoming more and more intense with each expedition that we go on.
Yeah, and like you said, I do agree with the part that it may not actually be coming through the detector, but actually through us to the detector to decipher.
Right. Right, absolutely.
And that's what I feel, because as you notice, when we move the detector away from us, Steve, it's not that active. But when someone brings the detector to us, then the information is exchanged, and the recorder or whatever it is starts, the magnetometer will start going berserk. And each tone also that emanates from these magnetometers has a message in it. And like Steve says, if you relax the mind and focus on that, it's a wealth of information, including who these beings are and what the message is.
Right. Right.
It's beautiful. It's absolutely beautiful.
It is beautiful, and I try to interpret that for people as it's happening to a point, but some of it is it's so much so quickly that it almost has to unfold over time. And, this is really an extraordinary level of contact that's happening, and it is transdimensional, and yet there sort of has to be a portal into linear space-time and Earth and humanity for it to happen. And since this first began to happen 3 or 4 years ago, I've said to everyone that what they're really doing is they're using our willingness to go into this state of samadhi and pure contact to then enter into linear space-time, and through the morphogenic field of our own bioelectric field, genetic field, it's then going into the hearts and minds of everyone on the planet. It literally is affecting the whole planet, and you can feel it. It's really an extraordinary and profound experience that is about it coming through us rather than us making it happen, as it were. It's something that we have to, I guess, be a clear enough vehicle for this to come through, and that's the art of this. The art of it is being able to get out of your own way and let this come through, and then the amazing things that happen, not only that's being photographed and seen with the eyes and felt, but the energy transformation that's taking place, which is, if you look at the whole Earth as sort of a crystalline field of consciousness and energy, which is what it is, it's actually resonating around the whole planet and everyone on the planet as it enters us. And we will actually, for example, in England, we actually had a burst of light that was right above the group that was so bright that it was coming out of transdimensional space-time, and it was physically visible, but you could tell it was originating from the level of the celestial level of the extraterrestrial worlds. In other words, civilizations that are physical and have planets, but where everyone on those planets are in a state of God consciousness at the level of celestial beings. So it's almost that they're operating at the level of God consciousness where it would be as if they were angels, except they're not angels. They're physical beings from other star systems, but their whole civilization is evolved to that level. And that's what's beautiful, is that humanity is headed to that. Humanity eventually is going to be, over the next few 100,000 years, we will all evolve into God consciousness people who, as a civilization, will then go amongst the stars. And this is the path that we're on, because what's happening in this whole new era that's opened up is that as this 500,000-year cycle is opening and then this old cycle is closing, there's a lot of chaos on the planet. But what this is really about is that a group of people, all of us together who understand these concepts, coming together and creating this morphogenic field that Rupert Sheldrake talks about, that affects the entire Earth and everyone on it, but and that then puts us firmly on that path of enlightenment and free energy and the ending of poverty and suffering and the entering into this age of enlightenment. But at the same time, we are doing this with full conscious awareness that we're not doing this alone, that there are civilizations out there that stand ready to assist us, but they're not going to force it. One of the things that I kept getting the message was that they have to have humans willing to be vectors or channels for this to happen. It's not like they're going to land on the White House lawn and force us into some sort of state of peace and enlightenment and interplanetary civilization, because it doesn't work that way. I mean, we've seen how successful trying to turn Afghanistan into a Jeffersonian democracy has worked. It works in this other way, where people have to awaken to this, put themselves at service to universal peace, and in higher states of consciousness, make this change happen. And that's what we're literally experiencing. So a lot of people who think that when they come on these expeditions, they're coming to sort of a seminar, they find out within about 12 hours that they're actually part of history in the making, and they're observing and being then part of. And what's wonderful is that these groups have become more and more resonant and coherent over the last year or two. And what we're finding is that the people who are being guided to come are the people who need to be there. And it's just, the whole group becomes sort of a morphogenic field, opening this portal to these other civilizations and to these other dimensions.
Absolutely. Do you want to play one of those tones?
Yeah, let's do. I mean, for folks who want to hear this, I want to play, just give you an example on what you're going to hear. Now, this is the magnetometer you're going to play now, right?
Yes.
So let me just explain again. This is a device. You can get a tri-field meter, and it has a magnetic field detector that, as I mentioned before, will pick up the changing of the magnetic field around you. You can set it at 0. And those of you who are interested, I mean, there's a CSETI app if you have an iPhone or an iPad where you can also download the protocols for contact from the App Store, and it's called the CSETI Contact app. And that app actually does turn your iPhone into a magnetometer. And but the magnetometer you're going to hear is sort of a professional grade one that's designed to pick up the magnetic field changes. And if you were to walk over to, say, a car engine or a motor, it would go really crazy because of it would just go and make a bunch of noise. Here you're going to hear this sort of nuance. In fact, sitting there out in the desert, we're around the middle of nowhere and there's no motors or nothing. When this begins to happen and this sort of connection occurs, it is so profound because you can see in your mind's eye the ETs there. There are actually physically things that you're seeing and experiencing. But then at the same time, there is this message coming through, and there's a nuance. It was almost, in Crestone, it was almost like a symphony of subtle sounds that came through. I don't know how much it came through on the recording, but we're just going to play a little bit of it right now for you.
You hear that?
Yeah. What's interesting about this, by the way, for folks, a lot of people who are hearing it in the circle, they're going, oh, this sounds a great deal like a, almost like dolphins speaking, or a dolphin kind of like, the sound that they make. And there is a quality to it. And it isn't at all like what these magnetometers make when you're putting it towards an artificial, man-made source of energy. Now, remember, this is going on for, 45 minutes? I think you said, Emery?
Yes. Oh, yes, at least 45 minutes in Crestone, where it was a solid 45 minutes of activity. And the activity was varying from different types of tones. It wasn't the same tone over and over.
Right.
It would start, actually, one of the tones that came in was very famous. The same one that came into France was a dun, dun, da, dun. And it was like dun, dun, da, dun, like the beginning, here we are coming. And then from there, it goes into a very, very technical type of message.
Yeah, very technical. Yes, it was.
Very technical. And it takes, for someone to listen to this, you really have to be in a special state of mind to decipher what's really happening.
Right.
And you really have to tone in and clear your mind and clear your ego and let it come inside and feel that message. And I said feel the message because you're feeling it.
Right, and it is at the level of the heart. Now, what happened in England, we'll play some of that in a minute. It went on for over an hour. We were in a crop circle near Silbury Hill, which is this conical-shaped man-made 4,500-year-old Neolithic monument that the purpose of which is not understood. Let's just leave it at that. Now, there was a crop circle that appeared very close to there this year. It manifested this day that we arrived in England, literally. I'm not kidding. And so we took our whole group in there. This is in the middle of the day, and I did a puja in this crop circle. And Emery couldn't come because he had a business appointment he couldn't get out of. So Emery wasn't there, and Emery, along with the magnetometer, is usually the other pole of the triad if you look at an equilateral triangle. Well, I was intuitively told to pick up a droji. Now, those of you who don't know what that is, Tibetan lamas have these things called drojis, and they're sort of brass wrapped around an metallic iron stem in the center, and it's two types of metal, and they are intended to be a facilitation of rapid enlightenment. And someone had given this, someone who is with, I won't say what country, but a country's intelligence officer who very much supported what we were doing and who was secrecy, gave us this droji a couple of years ago. So I picked up that droji. I had my right hand, I had the droji. My left hand, I had the magnetometer. And my heart, the center of my chest, made the third point in this triangle. And we're sitting, I'm facing Silbury Hill in the center of this crop circle, having done this puja, Sanskrit puja, where right afterwards we all meditated and went into this deep state of pure consciousness. And suddenly we have over an hour of this sort of the most beautiful and intense communication coming through this vector, this sort of portal that was created. And I realized after a little while that the droji and the central spine of the droji was taking the place of Emery's chakra system in his spinal cord. I mean, I could actually see it, and it was like the droji was standing in for Emery. I mean, in a bizarre sort of way. And what happened was then this over hour-long transmission that was spellbinding. And I mean, there were people who, of course, were visiting this crop circle, had no idea, or they knew, unfortunately, who I was, because I'm, people kind of know who I am. But they were lit, and they were going, "What? WTF?" I don't want to say it on the air, but is going on. I'm standing there. I'm standing there, or sitting there, in this crop circle, and the crop circle had a Sanskrit theme to it. Actually, it was almost like a mandala, and part of this crop circle had a central part of it looked almost like a head with a third eye, and that's where we made our circle and where we did the puja. And this went on, and I could actually see the interstellar civilizations and the crop circle makers that made the crop circle, and the ones that had ancient connection to the earth that were very tall, luminous, kind of white beings that many of you may have heard about this last summer. Within a few yards of where this crop circle appeared, there was another one that had appeared near Silbury Hill. And the police had been called out because apparently some farmer had seen people in the field at night, and there were reports he might have shot at them. So the police were out investigating this, and suddenly this police officer for the Wiltshire County Police saw this tall, luminous white being, fully materialized, running through the crop circle and in the field. And so he chased it. He chased this being. Now, this is an amazing account, and a lot of this is reported on Colin Andrews' side, who's worked with me for many, many years, and who invented the term crop circle. And so here we are within this short distance. And by the way, when the policeman was chasing this ET, he chased it and got close enough, but when he got too close to him, the extraterrestrial being dematerialized, and there were footprints where this ET had moved, and then they vanished into the wheat and just into clear space, and they actually documented this. Now, of course, this police officer was really freaked out because he thought all this stuff was bunk, and he knows better now. But we're in this same area a year later, having this contact. We see, actually, in fact, a member of our team actually photographs a disc right over the field where we are. And we're doing this puja, and suddenly we have this long transmission, and it's from this ancient civilization that's been involved with Earth since before Neolithic times, and that was chased. The member of this ET civilization was chased by the police that particular night. And we're there, and this contact is going on, and the communication is this really profound message about the Earth. The time of its transformation is at hand, that we have got to create a world of peace, that it goes into space peacefully. There are all these sort of aspects to the message, but it all started after the puja, and when I was holding this droji and the magnetometer in an equilateral triangle with my heart, just like usually there's Emery, and me and the magnetometer making a triangle. And again, this portal opened and out came all this communication. We're out in the middle of this, thousands of acres of wheat fields, by the way, when this is happening. So I don't know if you want to play some of that for folks. The communication from the makers.
Very active.
It was unbelievable. And, we had an electromagnetic engineer who had worked and actually retired with Los Alamos National Lab who knows this kind of equipment. And the audio expert who has been studying this for us, Charlie Balog, who works in the Phoenix area, and it's with our contact group in the Phoenix area, and works with Trudy Geiker there. He has listened to this, and there's a very long analysis that's going to go up on our website about these tones. They are not tones that this device can make through a man-made source, and it's clearly direct communication from the ETs. And the reason this is so significant, I always want people to think about this. Imagine if the Arecibo telescope in Puerto Rico with the SETI project, the Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence that Carl Sagan started, which is really a smokescreen. They know that we're already being visited. They're doing all that just to make it look like we haven't had contact yet. We're still looking. And this is the whole scientific fraud that's happening and being perpetuated on the public. But imagine if they were to have gotten over an hour of intelligent communication through one of those radio telescopes like this. It would be stop the presses worldwide. And that's what's now happening at virtually every one of these expeditions, not only with the craft that we're seeing and photographing and the beams that are there, but these electromagnetic communications. And unraveling and unfolding the message is, quite frankly, a very consciousness-centered process, but it's beautiful, beautiful energy. And I know that the people who are there when this is happening are in a state of a complete amazement, and also sense the beauty and the spirituality of it. It actually has an emotional and spiritual feeling and message to it when it's happening. And yet at the same time, there's a great deal of intelligence, almost mathematical, hyperdimensional mathematics that are coming through us and through us into the earth. And that's what I think is actually having an effect, and it's hard to describe, as it comes from consciousness and astral, the worlds of light, into linear space-time through us. It's actually affecting the genome. It's actually affecting the genetics and the physical plane. It's actually altering space-time. And I think this is happening because really, if you look at everything being connected non-locally through consciousness, those of you who've studied the science of consciousness, this is actually having an effect globally. And on everyone on the planet, and we can feel that. We feel like we're just sort of like, it's just a portal is opening and we're a vehicle for this, but we're a resonant field, and we have to be there to do it because there has to be, it's sort of like a step-down transformer, if you know what that is. If you have a power plant that has 1 billion watts of power coming out of it, for you to get 110 watts to run your computer at home, there have to be step-down transformers or it'd blow out your circuitry of your house and your computer. You can't handle 1 billion watts. And it's sort of something like that. It's sort of like we're being step-down transformers collectively through contact with these advanced civilizations, and there's something happening not only to us and through us, but into the earth and into Gaia and into the other people of the planet. And it's an amazing and beautiful thing to experience.
Yeah, I agree with that, Steve. And one of the other things, if we can touch base on it before the show's over, is I really would like to talk about the Thunderbolt Storm Tracker and the way that it follows you. And let me elaborate a little bit on this. The Storm Tracker, which we talked about earlier, which is used to identify supercells, which are huge thunderstorms, about 10% of most storms, and lightning that's within the storm, and squall lines. This device is really only made to go off if there's a storm or if there's lightning nearby. However, ours has been entrained in a way that there's these sentinel beings, like the security beings, that are in contact with Steve and have been with Steve all his life, I think. And what happens is they're using this storm tracker to communicate to us that they're there. And the way we know this is that the storm tracker I carry around with me. I live in Florida, and we use a storm tracker a lot. So I know how it responds to storms. I also know how it responds when I'm driving around. And when I am with Steve and driving him around, the storm tracker, when we're on our way to the site, and Steve gets in the car, and the car is ready, I'm in there in the car. As soon as Steve sits down in the car, the storm tracker beeps. and it's basically like contact. Like, as soon as his body sits in the seat, it's like, okay, confirmed. Right. Dr. Greer's in the vehicle.
Right.
As we're moving out the driveway, we make a right-hand turn. Beep, beep again as we make the turn. Okay, there was a change in the direction of Dr. Greer. Now, on every turn that we do, the detector goes off.
Correct.
And what I believe is happening is there's a frequency that Steve gives off. We all have a bioprint frequency, I believe. It's an energy field, like a thumbprint, a fingerprint, if you would. And we all have a different frequency we give off. And I believe that the ETs have locked on specifically to Steve's frequency. And anytime he moves, they're saying that we are here, we're there to protect.
Correct. And this has been going on for years, but now we have a device that they've actually selected and, as he said, and trained to go off. Now, to show you how bizarre this is, I mean, we're in England where there's no electrical storms, nothing. While we're there, it would go off the minute we would start to go somewhere, and then it would go off. If I had it in my backpack, it would go off until I put my pack down in my room at the hotel. When I'm stationary, it tends to just be quiet. Like once we're set up in the field, we were in this 2,000 or 1,800 acre estate in England, but it would go off while I was moving. But as soon as they got a fix on me, it was quiet. What's interesting is that one time I was in the hotel, and we come in at like 2 or 3 in the morning, and I'm thinking, oh gosh, this has got to get quiet because, people are sleeping. And one day I had that thought, and I opened the bag, and it had turned itself off. Now, the batteries hadn't died, and it has a recessed button that you have to physically push and hold down to turn it off. It was absolutely consciousness interfacing technology. The ETs picked up on that thought and switched it off. There are so many bizarre things with these electronics that you have to really kind of be there to believe it. But please believe me, this is what's happened. We have many, many witnesses to this, and it was so beautiful because what I feel from this is that there's for lack of a better word, a guardianship or group of beings that are sentinels and guardians that are very aware of what we're doing, and in some respects, some of the dangers involved, because we're taking on, a multi-trillion-dollar secret program that does not want the public to know what you're hearing today. And they are there to be sure that we're okay. And we've never not been alone. I'll just put it that way. But this is a way that they're confirming for it. And literally, it's almost like a cosmic GPS, because every time we'll make a turn or change in direction, it'll go off. Now, in England, every time there would be something like a danger in the road or something, I would think, oh, there's a dangerous situation. It would go off as if to say, we have your back. It's really very, very strange. And this is not something this is not a cheap piece of equipment. It's not malfunctioning. And it's doing it very specifically under specific conditions as a way of letting all of us know that we're protected. But yeah, somehow they're well, because I'm the director of the project, I guess, kind of locked on to my frequency. And I think there is a conscious. There's a field of energy where consciousness and the bioelectric and the chakra fields all come together, and everyone who knows meditation knows that. But that's kind of how they're connecting. but they're using this electronic device to confirm their presence and to make sure they're completely locked on no matter where we're moving. It's amazing.
It is, and sometimes if I get to the circle before you, another point is if I have the storm tracker, when you enter the circle, it goes off.
Right.
So it's aware that even though it's not with you, it's aware of your light and your frequency and your energy field as you approach the target area.
Right, and this gets us into the whole thing of, you know, how extraordinary these civilizations are and patient that they are, you know, here assisting in this work for contact and the creating of universal peace. And it's actually very touching and very beautiful. And even though this has happened now hundreds of times, I never cease to be humbled and amazed by it, to be honest with you, and kind of gobsmacked. It's just fantastic. And for those of you who are interested, we are going to be going to the remote Southern California desert in October, and for a week in a place that's a 700,000-acre wilderness area. So those of you who want to join us on that expedition, we will be there. I don't have the dates here in front of me, but it will be in October, and the information is at CSETI.org. And then we have plans to also do an expedition in Arizona in February, and then in Florida again in March or April. So stay tuned, and if you're interested, you can get on our notification list at CSETI.org, and we'll keep you informed of our progress and our plans for future events. Well, I think we're out of time, Emery, and I want to thank you for joining us in this discussion. And also for all of your help over the last couple of years. It's been amazing how much you've brought to this effort, and I want to thank you for that.
Oh, you're very welcome.
Well, and I'd like to thank the people at the World Puja Network for inviting us here every 2 weeks to update you on the progress of CSETI and disclosureproject.org. And I hope to see some of you at some of these expeditions under the stars. And if you're interested, you can go to disclosureproject.org to get the training kit to make contact as well, and also find out about the CSETI app, as I mentioned, if you have an iPhone or an iPad. So until next time, God bless you all, and keep looking up.